huge jump from the time we kicked this thing off in, what,
2006.
2006. I'm thrilled. I had no idea there were this many people. And of course, Matt regularly comes over and keeps us briefed. And I now get a weekly memo about whatever you guys tell Matt that I'm doing. So Matt Schofield's here. I want to make 4 quick points. One, we're doing a variety of versions of this, but I think 2 + 2 = 4 is the best single slogan for the conservative movement in both governing and politics. And I believe this for 2 reasons. It slows the conversation down. The bigger the topic and the slower the conversation, the worse the left is going to do. And second, it roots you back in reality. Virtually every American I've encountered so far understands 2 + 2 = 4. It comes in part from Camus, who said in The Plague, there are times when a man can be killed for saying 2 + 2 = 4. And I would argue that because the authorities can't stand the truth, I would argue Henry Waxman's reaction recently is an example of the Camus phenomena. Waxman is behaving precisely in the Hugo Chavez tradition of bullying demagogic politicians. And one of the goals of the movement should be to recruit a young Democrat to defeat him in the primary in 12. It's a district we probably can't win in general, but people this arrogant and this abusive should not be allowed to stay in office. The second example is it comes out of Orwell's 1984, where the torturer says to the innocent citizen, if the state tells you 2 + 2 = 3, it equals 3, and if it tells you 2 + 2 = 5, it equals 5. I can't imagine a better example of fantasy beliefs than the Obama spectacle this week. What you're seeing when I describe a secular socialist machine, and obviously any organization which can get $787 billion without any elected official knowing what's in the bill is a machine. It's not representative government. What you're seeing this week is 1920s fantasy diplomacy. As late as 1933, there is a disarmament conference in Geneva, which the New York Times is reporting on favorably as Adolf Hitler takes power. And it's really worth looking at putting the Obama model in the larger tradition of self-deluding leftists. What he represents is 1920s fantasy foreign policy combined with 1970s bad economics, combined with 1950s European social welfare state. So that's 3, and he does that because the Obama-Pelosi-Reed system is Springfield corruption, Chicago machine politics, and Alinsky's radicalism woven together into one system. So I think that for us to win, we have to basically make 3 arguments. 1, this is a secular socialist machine. It is very destructive of our values, our economy, and our safety, and should be defeated. 2, that it is totally appropriate when defeated to repudiate everything the machine has done. That's the tradition of Jefferson, who in the Judicial Reform Act of 1802 abolishes 18 out of 35 federal judges. It's in the tradition of Andrew Jackson, who repudiates the John Quincy Adams machine. And so it's perfectly legitimate in the American model to say, we don't actually care what you pass this year, because when we finish beating you, we're just going to repeal it all anyway. So you will both have sacrificed your career and achieved nothing. 3, I think we have to be a system that has better solutions. I absolutely believe we have to be a movement of yes, and I want to really drive this home. Ronald Reagan in 1980 and the Contract with America in 1994 are the 2 great victories of modern conservatism. Both were victories of saying yes. Reagan campaigned for the Kemp-Roth tax cuts. He campaigned for deregulation. He campaigned for defeating the Soviet Union. He had a positive agenda. He didn't just campaign against Jimmy Carter. Doesn't mean he was quite happy to campaign against Carter, but he knew that a negative campaign by itself was inadequate. We did not have a contract against Bill Clinton. We had a contract with America. We stood for welfare reform. We stood for tax cuts. We stood for a balanced budget. And I think it's very important that we be prepared to say, here's what we will do, and here's why they're wrong. But we want to emphasize, here's what we'll do. So that's my general overview, and I'll be glad to take questions about this. There's a new poll out this morning that says by 58 to 38, the country would repeal the health bill, and it's 50 for strong repeal to 32 for strong keep. So, and it'll get worse as people learn more, and as the failure of the bill becomes more obvious. So if you take that model, all the Republican Congress has to say in January is we won't fund it. Now the president then has to decide he's going to veto the appropriations bill So he's going to force a crisis on an issue which is a 58-38 issue, and it's going to get worse. It'll widen into it'll be about 2-to-1 or better by the time we get around to the fight, because this bill's a terrible bill. The solution to the government's debt problem is to quit spending. Okay. Now, every left-wingers are like teenagers who run in the door and say, I just ran up a $6,000 charge on my credit card. Would you increase my allowance? And the correct answer is no. Okay? Part one, you go back to the level of spending we had the 4 years I was Speaker, 2.9% a year, but you do it off the 2006 baseline. Remember, the Republicans lost in 06 because they were spending too much. The Democrats promptly spent more. I mean, so you go back to the 2006 baseline. Nobody felt there was too little government in 2006. So you're starting to say, no, our answer, this is where I thought the Broder column Sunday was about as explicitly wrong as you could be, because it starts with, since we clearly have to tax more because otherwise we wouldn't be responsible, so anybody who's not for tax increase is irresponsible. My answer, and again, I say this from the background of having done it. We balanced the budget for 4 consecutive years while cutting taxes. We cut taxes to increase economic growth, which, by the way, works. You'll notice government revenue is up as the economy the economy's not recovering, but it's failing to collapse. I mean, the Obama model, which is remarkably like Jimmy Carter, is you should be grateful that the level of misery we've gotten to is not nearly as bad as it would have been. So I would say, first of all, we should say no tax increase of any kind. No Republican in the House or Senate should support any tax increase. 2, no value-added tax. I mean, a value-added tax is a complex hidden sales tax whose primary purpose is to allow politicians to raise taxes without you noticing it. 3, the choice is simple. Do you want the American people to have to control their budget so they can pay more taxes, or do you want the politicians to control the government budget so the American people can have more take-home pay? I'm with the American people and more take-home pay. Let our friends on the left be with the government. And then I would go back to Jim Froeg's book on fraud and theft, and I would look at the grotesqueries of government employee unions who now have better deals than the people who pay taxes to pay their salaries. And I'd say, why aren't we reforming the entire structure of government? Well, I think the top one, and again, at American Solutions, we have laid this out pretty aggressively. The top one has to be jobs. Dramatically cut taxes, cut regulations, cut litigation, maximize job growth, emphasize small business, which is the biggest job producer. Because if you're at 9.7% unemployment and 17.5% total underemployment, and you're not focusing on jobs, you just don't get what's at the heart. I'm not nearly as excited about extended unemployment, which is the Democrats' battle cry, as I am about extended employment. I'm fascinated that all these Democratic senators are wild about unemployment and have not got a clue about employment. They would turn the whole country into Detroit. So the second ground rule, I would say, is balancing the federal budget. And I think at American Solutions, we're going to have a major effort on reasserting and reestablishing the balanced budget campaign. We came within 1 vote. We passed the balanced budget amendment in the House, came within 1 vote of passing it in the Senate. The fact is, if politicians don't have a limit, they pay off everybody. And you need to give them a limit so they can say, I can't do it. And I think it's a moral imperative to get back to a balanced budget as well as an economic imperative. In our judgment, the number 3 issue is energy. If you can't have a strong dollar if you're paying $500 or $600 billion a year for energy. I mean, the great problem is not China. The great problem is energy imports. And if we were creating $500 or $600 billion a year more of American energy, creating American jobs, keeping the money in America, having the next building boom in St. Louis instead of Dubai, we'd be a much healthier and a much safer country. And so we think you have to have a pro-American energy program, and we've outlined that at American Solutions. And then the 4th thing that I'm very concerned about and very interested in is education reform. And that's why I've gone around the country causing some confusion in conservative ranks by showing up with Al Sharpton and with Secretary Arne Duncan. But if you look at what we said and you look at the points we're making, they're pretty darn important points about the future. You cannot compete with China and India without fundamental improvement in American education.
Great to be back, and Rob has grown this briefing into something that is unrecognizable compared to what we had years ago. Just want to take a few minutes to tell you all about what is happening with Heritage Action for America. Last week in Naples, Florida, our board of directors of the Heritage Foundation voted unanimously to start a new organization, Heritage Action for America. I think most of you understand that the Heritage Foundation is a 501c3 organization. We're a nonprofit at Heritage, and we do not take positions on specific pieces of legislation and promote them on Capitol Hill. Heritage Action for America will do that. We will take very clear positions on these pieces of legislation, and we will utilize the 633,000 members we have and growing now at the Heritage Foundation to get active and to put pressure on members of Congress to vote for conservative policies.
We know that small business people are very highly esteemed still, at least with the general public, if not with the administration. This administration actually doesn't have any at all, anywhere, that we can find inside of the administration or in any kind of policy making role or policy advising role. 90% of American voters actually think that feel positively about small business, according to recent surveys we've done. The majority of people think that less regulation is better. It will help renew jobs that we are actually the drivers of. As some of you may know, yesterday they finalized or actually today, I guess, they finalized the rule that prohibits, cuts off federal construction dollars to non-union companies out there, and wouldn't be a big deal except for the fact that we're 85% of the industry is non-union. So this administration continues down that road.